Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Dollar Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips, and today we are speaking to Scott Mitchell Rosenberg. Scott has had an incredible career, starting as a comic dealer in the speculation market in the 1980s, then going on to help found Malibu Comics, putting together the deal for Image, and then starting his own studio, Platinum Studios, which has put out things like Men in Black, Cowboys and Aliens, and much, much more. It is a fascinating story. He's a fascinating guy. I think you're really going to enjoy this. So without further ado, here's Scott. Scott Mitchell Rosenberg. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time.
Of course.
I'd like
Sounds
to,
like it'd be a fun day.
I'm looking forward to it. I want to take you back to the very beginning. How do you first discover comic books?
Well, um, when I was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5, um, I saw a newsstand and went, I want, and started grabbing comics from there. Um, I'll jump to when I'm 13 because that's when I started actually. I realized that to keep buying comics and feed my habit, I have to start selling comics. So that's when I started taking out mail order ads, which I didn't know how to type. So I just kind of, hand wrote. And no, it didn't look that great. And I also started taking a table, and they used to be called tables, not booths back then, at conventions. We had a monthly one in LA.
Oh, wow. And from that moment, did you decide, you know what, this is an industry that I would like to explore more and perhaps make into a career?
Not at all. I
Okay.
was just a 13-year-old kid collecting comic books. I didn't think past that.
So how did the idea come to pursue a career in the industry?
The desire to have a gap year between college and graduate school. Uh, and what am I going to do during that gap year? So comics sounded great. So I really didn't think, I figured I'd be going back to school and be a lawyer or something. So it didn't really dawn on me, even after I was starting, that it would be a career in comics. And I'll get into later on where also it didn't dawn on me some other things that we got into that I didn't think of ahead of time.
Well, what was the comic scene like in California at the time, as far as independent publishers and things like that?
Well, in okay, so I graduated in '85. The first comic book we came out with was X Mutants #1 in August of '86,
Mhm.
and that was during the black and white boom,
Mhm.
which lasted a whole another 12 months or so. Um, so I mean, so indies were popular at that point, and distribution was changing where you can now order from distributors. For the last few years, it had been that you could order through distributors instead of the old way to get comics.
Mhm.
And so I don't know, it all seemed kind of easy to get into and easy to find what you want. Uh, and stores back then used to really care about selling out of an item and wanting to get it back in stock before their neighbor, in case their neighbor has it, because there were comic stores everywhere at the time.
Mhm.
So when I was in college, which was 80 to 85, I took the 4.5 year plan.
Mhm.
Um, for the last couple of years of that, my roommate and I started up a business of mail order, mostly to stores, that we would speculate on what would sell out
Mhm.
and then sell it to them. And some comics like G.I. Joe pretty much paid my tuition.
Wow. So what was the formula you were using in making those speculations?
Um, I'd always been kind of good at kind of guessing what people are going to be looking for, just I guess from conventions.
Mhm.
My mail order when I was 13 was not new comics. That was just old stuff.
Right.
Um, and because I liked Golden Age and Silver Age and all of that. But just kind of getting a gut feeling for what kinds of things would sell out. So back when I was in college, Spidey had his new black uniform, his new black costume. Thor 337 came out. There were just a whole bunch of keys that came out that I would speculate on, none as much as I speculated on G.I. Joe.
Right.
On G.I. Joe, it's actually kind of funny. I come home from class one day, and my roommate, we're still best friends,
Mhm.
was sitting outside on a chair. And he said, I bet you wonder why I'm sitting outside our apartment on a chair. I said, yes. Why, Mitch? Why are you sitting outside our apartment in a chair? He said, well, open the door, enjoy yourself. So I opened the door, and there were just boxes and boxes and deep, dense boxes. Evidently, I had ordered from a whole bunch of distributors at the same time, figuring I'd get 10% of what I ordered or something like that.
Mhm.
But no one else cared about G.I. Joe yet, so I got 100% of what I ordered.
Wow.
So they started with boxes from the one end of our living room, all the way until they left the apartment at the front door. So we quickly had to find a storage unit for them. And then I had the joy of them not selling for several months. I, my friend kept saying, "Are you sure about these?" I said, "I am sure. I don't know why anyone else isn't." So I called a few stores and asked if they would take a bunch on consignment,
Mhm.
and some said yes. And I mean, that's not what started the boom in G.I. Joe, but at least for us, that's what got the ball rolling. And all
Mhm.
of a sudden, people everywhere were trying to order them. And we found some secret supplies. Like we used to get them from Target.
Wow.
Target would have GI Joe 1 in a bag just hanging,
Right.
and also 17, 18, and 19. So uh, we would go in there every week and just raid their boxes for whatever they had. And after not too long, I started thinking, well, where are you guys getting these? And it said Marvel Books on the box. And I didn't have a Marvel account at the time, but Marvel Books, I found out, was completely separate from Marvel Comics. Same offices, but totally separate. So I called them and I said, so about these 3 packs, what's the minimum order? And it was many in the thousands. And I said, now, what about, do you have 5 packs? And 5 packs was about 11 cents more than a 3 pack. So it was a no brainer. So we ordered number twos, which were the hardest to get.
Mhm.
These were all second prints, and we labeled them as such. But two, three, four, five, and then we got 17 through 19, and I forgot what else we got. But it was quite exciting.
So, with the success of that, what's your next move?
Um, so after I graduated college, I was at San Diego Comic Con. This was in '85. I've been going there since I was 13. So I love that show. It's to me, it's vacation, it's work, it's whatever anyone wants to call it, but I love it. Um, and a guy named Brian Marshall came up to me and pitched me on a comic called The Young Ex Mutants, like too many words, but but that the hamsters were popular then, lots of stuff was coming out. But anyway, pitched me on it, and I said, "Can we shorten the title to Ex Mutants?" Which I thought would be awesome, with Marvel's X-Men. And this is the opposite of X-Men. These are humans that used to be mutants.
Mhm.
Uh, and I said, and you're pitching me this. Does that mean every single publisher, including Garage guys, have passed on this? And he said, yes, everybody. No one wants it. And it was like Ron Lim was going to be drawing it.
Mhm.
And I love Ron Lim art. I still love Ron Lim art.
Mhm.
And Ron Lim's a great guy. Um, And I said, okay, I don't really know how to publish. But I said, I have my credit card. The budget's going to have to be low. It's going to be in black and white. The
Mhm.
cover price is going to have to be on the high side. Because I just, I was out of college and didn't have money at that time, and I decided I wanted to do it. And remember, when you're financing the first one, you also are financing the second one in production and the third one in production. So you're really hoping it works.
Right.
Uh, and it did. Between the first and second printing, or special edition at 8 extra pages, we sold 130,000 copies. I was hoping for 8,000 because at least that I could make a little.
Right.
Um, so I mean, we started putting out more titles, and that was kind of the beginning. And then meeting Chris Ohm
Mhm.
was also a huge part. of starting up publishing, and then Tom Mason and Dave Oldrich. So I mean, it was like the beginning team.
How did you market the books at the time? Because this is before internet, and there were a few comic magazines out there. Was it just word of mouth or going from store to store trying to drum up interest?
I'm the only one I could afford to advertise in because I had a whole $400 budget. Now,
Mhm.
in today's dollars, maybe that's a $2,000 budget. I don't know, but it's low.
Mhm.
Was the Comic Buyer's Guide, which came out every week in big newspaper format.
Mhm.
And I took out and I didn't have a design department or anything like that. So I took out an all black ad with white X Mutants coming August 86. And I figured with the boom going and I that people would just be interested. I just, there was some word of mouth. I'd call some stores that I know to please carry it.
Mhm.
Um, I say some, I probably called 100 stores
Mhm.
and, begged them to order it. And evidently everyone around the country ordered it for to come in those quantities.
Wow.
And there's a lot of speculation then, so it doesn't mean 130,000 different people,
Right.
um, but I mean that's kind of the only marketing I had at that time,
Wow.
and solicitations, which
Mhm.
went to stores.
You mentioned some names before. This is sort of the beginning of the building of Malibu. When you were starting that up, what's step one in creating that company?
People.
Okay.
So step one was people. I had we set up Eternity Comics, which is what Malibu was first called.
Mhm.
Uh, Malibu's like an umbrella title and had Eternity and Adventure Comics and Malibu Comics in it. Um, so X Mutants, and then there were some other comics that we started building that was with Brian Marshall and his office on the East Coast, which I had hired Chris, and Chris and I would like fly there on a weekend, sleep in the office because we couldn't afford hotels. I mean, it's an indie publisher, still black and white. I mean, so that's kind of how it started, uh, and then Dave Oldrich, who was working for me at a distribution company, came and said, can I start a comic company? And I said, yes. And then he introduced me to Tom Mason, and Chris Ulm was already working with me. And I mean, that was really the beginning. Our first bookkeeping program was an $80 spreadsheet program.
Is the mentality going into that as you guys are going to be competition for DC and Marvel, or are you guys going to be an alternative to DC and Marvel?
An alternative too. In fact, our marketing campaign, a couple of those years, was Malibu Comics, very independent.
Okay.
So kind of an alternative too.
You mentioned people. What was it that you were looking for in bringing people in? Was it a business sense? Is it a personalities that you can work with? What were some of the criteria you were looking for?
Good question. Um, well, with Chris and Dave, I was already working with them, so that wasn't really something I was thinking through.
Okay.
Uh, I remember walking in the back of the warehouse one day and seeing this really young-looking guy just sitting on the desk, his legs moving, and that turned out to be Tom Mason, which David introduced me to, and um, they had both worked for another comic publisher before,
Hmm.
and so it just seemed like that was a good team. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was really starting out in it.
You speak of it being an umbrella corporation, bringing in different titles. What were, superheroes were hot at the time? Is it just superheroes you're looking for, or other sort of comics as well?
Okay, so we were doing a few different things.
Mhm.
Uh, in our first couple years, we did some superhero titles, but they were black and white and not really meant for mainstream. I mean, we'd write them hopefully for mainstream, but black and white is definitely a limiting factor.
Mhm.
Um, and there were various comics that were pitched to us, like Men in Black, um, that Lowell Cunningham had pitched, and his was another. He had 70 pass letters, and I'm like, I'm not even going to ask why we're the last people seeing this, but um, to me, it looked like, and this was back in the 80s, it felt like Ghostbusters to me, even though the comic was serious. There's no jokes in the comic,
Mhm.
but it still felt like a whole world to me. So I didn't know the movie business, and it was few years after that that I started pitching it around. But so we started doing that with the superheroes. We looked to public domain, and like we created a group called the Protectors,
Mhm.
which were from a bunch of early 40s era superheroes that fell out of the public domain.
Mhm.
And like some of the Centaur comics that was before Marvel fell into the public domain,
Mhm.
um, where they just weren't copyrighting them correctly for that period of time. Nowadays, just the fact of writing something on a piece of paper, it's copyrighted. That's just what the law is. But
Right.
that isn't what it was then. Uh, so we gave them just different characters, different personalities,
Mhm.
and that did well for us. And it was fun doing it. I mean, that was in color, and that was as we were figuring out how to color ourselves on computers, where we hoped one day we could be as good as by hand. We didn't ever realize we were going to completely surpass that,
Right.
but but that we did. You know, practice makes perfect.
I do remember the Protectors very well because there's that issue with the hole right through the center. And I remember
That
seeing
was our best. That was our best seller on the newsstand.
that was awesome. But I mean, how does that idea come up? Because every page is going to have a hole in it, and you have to hope that fans, reading it aren't going to mind that. But I mean, it was a brilliant idea.
We figured that it was such a cool thing we were doing to it because there had never been that before,
Mhm.
that everyone would just kind of forget that, yes, it's poking right through the story page after page. Um, and that it was the center of the comic. And I don't even think it ever really hit the guy.
Right.
But I don't remember now, but I don't think it did. But on the newsstand, oh, and then so we got coverage in USA Today.
Mhm.
The whole goal was to get coverage
Mhm.
outside of the comic market. I mean, that's where we're headed with a lot of the coverage that we got. We wanted mainstream,
Mhm.
and it just flew off the shelves on the newsstand. And we were one of the few independents putting out comics on the newsstand at the time. Marvel and DC had been doing it forever, but we'd kind of learned how to do it. So we were doing that, and boy, did it have a lot of sell through.
I'm wondering at the time, when do you start to realize, A, you're good at what you do, and that you've made the right choice getting into this industry at that point?
I never thought about it, to be honest.
Okay.
I really just kept going. Good months, bad months. I just kept going
Mhm.
and didn't really get into the thought process of any part of it other than I want this to succeed.
Right.
So it wasn't, at a certain point I ran past college age. I wasn't going back to school.
Right.
And uh, why look for a job when I had the best one in the world playing with comic books? So, and we have good years and bad years, but still, I always felt it would work. And we had a formula there of how to get by difficult months,
Mhm.
which was we would figure out ahead of time what our budget was,
Mhm.
what we needed to hit in terms of sales,
Mhm.
and then we'd build the solicitation around that. Later on in Ultraverse years, it was a whole different thing. But in our beginning years, I think we had a month that we probably did 20 plus comics. I mean, we were trying to look to publish reprints of the old comic strips and old comics. Uh, so we would either license rights or find them in the public domain, um, or in some cases, put aside 5% because we couldn't figure out who to give it to. And we wanted, in good faith, that that person finds us, that we have it there. Like, very interestingly, we were publishing I Love Lucy comics, and I was really good at hunting down rights, and I could not find a person who would lay claim to it
Wow.
at all, anywhere, not even partly. I mean, all they would say is it's not us. Maybe it's TV station. Maybe, they didn't even know where to point us to.
Wow.
So that was just something that we figured, okay, well, if we find that person, we can pay them. But
Mhm.
uh, so we calculated that into our budget, but we never did find who was controlling them.
Wow. On a business side, how long do you give a book to find its footing before you have to make the decision whether to keep going with it or not?
We like to finish a storyline as best we can.
Okay.
So if something has a four-issue storyline, we don't really want to cancel it at issue number two.
Right.
So we would try to finish storylines. I mean, I'm sure we failed in a couple circumstances, but I mean, that was mainly we wanted to finish. We were storytellers and wanted to finish the story.
That makes sense. This history of Image has been well told through the years, and there is no history of Image without your involvement in it. Um, did the artists come to you directly and say, "Listen, this is an idea we're cooking up. What's your input on it? What do you think?"
Um, Rob Liefeld had been doing some covers for us before he was a superstar.
Mhm.
He actually did an X Mutants cover, I think number four.
Okay.
Um, so there was a relationship there, and Dave Ulrich kept saying, "Come here, come here, come here." Uh, and at a certain point, uh, I don't know if that did it, but at a certain point, Rob was ready and talked the other guys into it,
Right.
into defecting in mass, which he was the first one to come over,
Mhm.
which was brave.
Right.
And, we made the deal with them. I remember when I was making the deal, Todd McFarlane didn't believe in paper. He believed in video. So the whole contract for us to distribute them, for their first year or so of titles was done on video.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there any nervousness on your part taking on such an undertaking at the time?
No, we thought everyone was crazy saying no.
Okay.
That or wouldn't come to the same terms that we were willing to come to. We thought they were just everyone was just nuts.
Right.
But the funny thing is, I wanted to promote it mainstream again outside the comic market. I mean, it was going to be promoted in the comic market no matter what because of the level of these guys.
Right.
But I wanted to get it outside, and we started interviewing publicity firms, and most of them actually turned us down. They
Wow.
said they weren't going to take our money, which I guess is, nice of them to say that, though. They weren't going to take our money for something no one is going to care about. And we're sorry, but you could do write as much as you want. No one is going to care that a handful of artists came, from Marvel to you to put out some comic books,
Hmm.
which weren't even out yet.
Right.
Uh, so we did find one. It was a smallish publicity company, and one of the guys there was a comic fan, and the owner and I talked personally about it, uh, and they did believe in it, did believe that it could matter.
Hmm.
And next thing we know, Marvel's stock price had dramatically dropped in one day when this was announced, and CNN was sitting in our office interviewing me in front of our big wall of comics. We used to tape up on the wall a new comic every time it came out.
Right.
Um, and and then his next stop was going to be to the president of Marvel.
Hmm.
So I called him and I warned him. I just thought, just being,
Right.
publisher's honor.
Right.
I told him, what we had said, what we talked about, and he gave an interview that just sealed the deal for us.
Wow.
He said, so because we were saying artists matter and people will follow them. He said, only characters matter, nothing else. Artists will come and go. Um, Now, there may be some truth to it in terms of artists do change and work on different series and they come and go. but they do bring sales to it, and he wasn't willing to accept that.
Mhm.
But anyway, him saying that was just fantastic for us because I mean we're like the champions of the artists, and here is someone playing right into that
Wow.
with advance notice.
And the wonderful thing was at the time, you know, there's excitement about the books, but you guys are also doing like road tours. Buses are coming to different shops around the country. Fans get to meet these artists. Even before some of these books come out, there was a genuine buzz around the comic community that this is happening and things are
Hmm.
changing.
Hmm.
Were you guys just as caught up in the excitement as us fans?
Well, okay, so for each comic that came out, we were one of the reasons they came to us was our marketing abilities, which were very strong.
Mhm.
We were awesome at marketing,
Mhm.
and uh, but each one wanted a better marketing plan than the one before. So every month, which we were used to doing, by the way, based on our other comics, didn't sell in those ranges, but we would always every month come up with how are we going to market this. The reason we had more than one imprint was allowed us to market more of our comics. Um, because one could come from Eternity while one's coming from Malibu, and one coming from Adventure Comics. So we had several ways to market.
Mhm.
Um, but with these, we would come up with a plan for each one. Like it was very mass market plan with Youngblood, and it ended up being the first indie comic ever to hit #1 on the sales charts, um, which was exciting.
Mhm.
And is exciting again for me now because we've relaunched it, but we can talk about that later in the interview.
Mhm.
Um, so there was a different marketing plan around each of the comics, and that's what fans were seeing. And there's nothing that can replace fans being interested anyway. Just the groundswell up. Nothing in the world can replace that. But yeah.
And the thing is, you have all this going on with Image, and the same time, plans are being put together for the Malibu line, Ultraverse, all that going on. So you guys really
Yes.
had so many irons in the fire at that point.
Hmm. We
What did you
did.
see Ultraverse turning it into in your mind?
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
What did you see
Wait.
Ultraverse's
Oh,
long-term future becoming?
we saw it like a mini Marvel.
Right.
I mean, it's a whole universe, different dimensions, characters really thought out by multiple people.
Mhm.
Uh, a lot went into that, and the world building of it, and coming out with like our first month was 3 comics, and our continuity was always tied.
Right.
So second month was another, next month was another, and I think we about 7 titles is when we did the Barry Smith Rune thing. But we're following a continuity
Mhm.
that made sense as to where the characters were when something was going on, which Marvel and DC had long since, gone away from that. I remember reading as a kid, how can the Justice League be in space when Wonder Woman is, on the ground over there? Um, but we really cared about all that. We poured all of our hearts into it.
How do you maintain that continuity though? Because you would think people would want to sort of pull one way or the other. How do you keep everyone steering in the same direction of sorts?
Well, what we would do is we would do fill-in issues.
Okay.
That could be specials or something like that were outside of continuity
Mhm.
because it's not realistic to think that you have an artist who's a human being
Mhm.
uh, that can put out 12 issues, every year, a month, every in and out, no matter whether they go on vacation or get sick or, whatever. So we would do fill-in issues and specials to cover up those areas that we anticipated happening.
This is also the time where there's a lot of not variant covers, but different Marvel's putting out hologram covers. There's glow in the dark covers.
Hey, we were the first with hologram,
I was,
with full cover hologram.
you know, where do these, how much, time and effort does it take to put this stuff together artistically for it to look as good as it did?
Well, okay, so what we did with our company all the way through from the beginning days till the company was sold is Chris and Tom and Dave and I would meet for breakfast once a week
Mhm.
and go over what we could during that breakfast, and then a bigger meeting would always also take place to get things to the next level of how we're going to do it. But we'd come up with those plans either there or someone would come up with the plan during the day or say, "Oh my God, this magazine did this," and would run through the office and be like, "Oh my God, we can do that if they can do that." Uh, and then design, we have great design group. So we'd just make it work.
Because I remember, Shadowhawk had the trifold covers. You had so much stuff going on, and this is also the time of speculation where folks are buying multiple copies
Mhm.
of each book. For you guys, how important was it having sort of a relationship with Wizard and, magazines such like that to put the word out? Because like we said before, there was no internet at the time. This is where fans
Right.
got their news.
We tried our best to have relationships with all of the different publications.
Mhm.
There was nothing online at the time, really, but
Right.
I mean, there was an online that we used, but that was, barely for text.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, with all the magazines, it was Wizard and then Hero came,
Mhm.
and there were a couple others I'm not remembering right now. Plus, we put out our own
Mhm.
that would be almost free that would send to stores, the Malibu Sun, that would promote things.
Mhm.
And Comic Shop News was great at promoting things.
Mhm.
So we were everywhere we could be. And the promotions would be at different times because there's trying to get stores to order it, which is a couple month different timing than trying to get uh, fans to buy it. So, and then speculators were somewhere in the middle of that. So we had to kind of think on all cylinders. But we were used to. We liked doing that. I mean, that was what we considered, fun. Not that it was easy. I will never say that. But, to work something out, even when it sounds hard to work something out, it's exciting. It's like breaking a story.
Well, and I want to talk about that for a second because you mentioned it's not easy. There's, a lot of pressure on you because everything is getting bigger and bigger. How are you handling the pressure of this company just sort of meteorically taking off?
Well, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of pressure because mistakes are there. Maybe good things happening are great, but mistakes are can be pretty spectacular
Right.
themselves, and cost you a lot.
Mhm.
So we'd be very careful. Like at conventions, uh, which I'd been selling at since I was, a kid, and I was actually the first person at the monthly convention to start putting percent off signs behind me. Uh, So I like firsts
Mhm.
or just things that most people aren't doing or haven't done recently. So at the conventions, we would build our booth not to just be there, but to be an attraction. Uh, like with the Ultraverse, we had a signature book with a whole bunch of pages of different signatures of the different of people on staff and artists and that we also had several people signing at any given time at the convention. So people would maybe have to come back, and we always wanted the table to look busy.
Mhm.
I mean, genuinely busy, not just well, people standing there, but
Right.
caring and hopefully some kind of a line.
Mhm.
We had one interesting thing that we're at San Diego Comic Con, and the fire department. This wasn't just aimed at us, just said no more lines that go outside the booth. And we had just built this whole booth, uh, biggest one we'd ever built.
Mhm.
And I go talk to Faye at San Diego Comic Con. I said, okay, I get it, but what are the rules? And she knew when she told me the rules that I was going to find a way around it. I mean, because I always did. That was, again, It's one of the things. So, because our plan we didn't want it to even try to survive without the whole plan being there. We didn't know what would happen if no people could line up. We
Mhm.
had no clue because you had to go upstairs and have your table upstairs and draw people upstairs, and it's just not easy. So came back to the booth,
Mhm.
and I remember Chris and Dan Forsey came up to me, and I had a look on my face that there's a solution, and they said, "Okay, what do we have to do?" I said, "The line has to be able to be around the booth." So even if people are standing up back to the booth, uh, we had to move the entire booth. After just building it from, I don't know what time we got there, 4 or 5 a.m. or something like that. And this is like 45 minutes or an hour before people were being let in.
Mhm.
We didn't finish. I mean, people started coming in before we're still moving our booth. It wasn't simple.
Right.
Um, to do, the whole booth was planned for a certain thing.
Mhm.
But fortunately, there was some leeway and enough leeway that we can get people to stand up in line now, with their backs up to it. And then we kept the line entertained.
Mhm.
Uh, like we would give out rune temporary tattoos.
Well,
I remember uh, Diane Bada doing that for us. She would answer fan mail and stuff too, but not just her. I mean, others would go around and either hand some kind of collectible out or temporary tattoos, something to keep the line engaged, so no one was upset with us that they were standing in line.
gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
So we always, so usually the situation would cause us to come up with some kind of marketing thing, either an opportunity
Mhm.
or an obstacle, whatever it was, we
Mhm.
would react. And in advance too, like we
Right.
wanted to build people around the booth and didn't think that people could be taken away from us.
Right.
Um,
I want to talk for a second about working with different personalities because with the success of Malibu, you had a lot of big names coming in to the
mhm,
company who wanted to work with you. And people have
mhm.
all sorts of different personalities, what they want, how they work, what they're looking for, and this and that. How
Yes.
do you manage those personalities to keep everyone happy and at the same time keep books coming out and the assembly line keeps going?
That's when we would have different people working with them. I mean, usually the person who got them to come in
Mhm.
was usually going to have a pretty good relationship with them.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of personalities, a lot that were far from easy. Um, and some things that we'd want to do that we'd run by them, because maybe it's a marketing thing that they may not like,
Mhm.
and we want to make sure everyone is happy.
Mhm.
So if we have to explain it, we'll totally explain it through. If we have to go on to a different one, we will.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, we kind of managed it that way.
Okay.
It's just with our own personalities.
I want to jump ahead a couple of years because an opportunity comes to sell to Marvel. Where did the groundwork of that begin? What was the first inkling that this could be a possibility?
DC wanting to buy us.
Okay.
Uh, that's when I remember after we'd gone through that process for a bit,
Mhm.
uh, pretty extensively. I got a call from Marvel's president, uh, Terry Stewart at the time,
Mhm.
and said, "I hear your company's for sale." And then the clincher was Ronald Perlman. People may not know that name anymore, but he was, the Elon Musk of his day. He was one of the billionaires. Um, and I'll never forget, he came into our office. And after this happened,
Mhm.
we made a deal the next breakfast.
Okay.
But he came into our office and, with his signature cigar in his mouth
Mhm.
that he doesn't take out. And um, the first thing I said, because I was thinking about if I'm going to be giving a tour of the artist, we have all of our just out of college and, our green group.
Mhm.
And I myself didn't like smoke, but um, And I said, you're going to have to put it out. And he was very smart. He said, okay, give me an ashtray. Well, does a non-smoking place have an ashtray? So I turned to my assistant and I said, give him that. She said, give him a Dixie cup. We had no other choice. I mean, he thought it was fun. He ended up sending a box of cigars. Um, I, and I remember he said, why do people keep saying your comics are better than ours? And it's not just us saying it. He was getting that word from everybody. That was pointing him to wanting to buy the company. I said, well, take a look at them. He said, I don't know a comic book at all. He said, I don't. Okay. I said, okay, why don't we look at a stack of your comics from this month and a stack of ours from this month, which I had prearranged
Right.
because I figured he didn't know his comics. And, ours had the glossier paper,
Mhm.
not super expensive, but the paper that could hold our ink the right way to make our coloring pop
Mhm.
that didn't break the bank. It was certainly better than Marvel's paper, but Marvel's stuff wasn't popping.
Mhm.
And it felt different. It smelled different.
Mhm.
Um, it was a different animal, and that really, I mean, that was one of the things that impressed him. It's also where some of the rumors are they bought us for our coloring department came about, but that isn't true.
Right.
But I mean, DC really liked the coloring department, but anyway, Marvel didn't buy us for that reason. But I don't know if I answered your question,
No,
but
no, definitely. Were you nervous at all that this is something you built? It's going to Marvel. What are they going to do with it? Was there?
oh hell, yes, I was nervous.
Yeah,
Uh, because everything that I was being told sounded great, but I was being courted.
right. Did they make?
And we
Oh,
and,
go
and
ahead.
we partly picked Marvel over DC. I mean, DC had this onerous clause that would have the price keep going down if we didn't make a deal right away, and Marvel's didn't.
Right.
Uh, DC, we were many, many, many months into uh, doing all the due diligence and all that sort of stuff. With Marvel, we ended up doing it in less than 30 days. Um, but I forgot the question.
Oh, no, were
Oh,
you
was I
nervous?
nervous? Was I nervous? Yes, I was nervous because I, you know, and our investors that we had in the company
Mhm.
were friendly with Marvel. They had previously done another deal,
Okay.
so they were Marvel leaning. Now, they didn't have the majority, but I mean, but they were Marvel leaning, and just in terms of their thoughts
Mhm.
and in terms of ease of transaction uh, with Marvel. I mean, they came in secretly.
Wow.
Um, it was pretty. I mean, secret from the world. Our own
Right.
staff would know, but at one point, I think we did it in someone else's offices. But anyway, yeah, I was nervous, and it all anything I was nervous about, kind of multiply that times 5 or 10, and that's what kind of came out of it.
Yeah, going down the line a little bit now, Platinum Studios starts to come together.
Mhm.
Was this an idea you had in the back of your head all along? Or was this something that as time went by, you started putting pieces together and said, this might be something?
Well, Men in Black, which hadn't come out yet, uh, that got me into setting up movies.
Mm.
Which, by the way, every studio in Hollywood turned Men in Black down on me 2 to 3 times each.
Wow.
Yeah, it was over the course of years. I was like despondent with my agent, like they just don't like it. He said, "Dude, they're willing to listen to you pitch the same property again. Uh, that isn't normal."
Mm.
So that was nice. But before that, we had done our own stuff without the studios. We were able to self-finance the Ultraforce animated series,
Mm.
which we got financed by our licensees.
Mm.
Uh, we had a chicken or egg kind of situation with the distributor and with our licensees. The
Mm.
distributor, if we made the show, would take it, um, but the licensees, you know, didn't really know if our line was going to do well or not. So,
Right.
uh, I mean, everyone was happy, by the way. In fact, Ultra Force, the show, had better ratings than the Marvel Action Hour it was up against.
Wow.
enough for Marvel to cancel it, unfortunately, when they bought us. But so back to your question about Platinum Studios.
Mhm.
Uh, for various reasons, I quit uh, Malibu, which wasn't an easy decision to make, but Marvel made it pretty simple.
Mhm.
Um, so I remember flying out there one day and just saying, no more. This was after layoff after layoff after layoff. And I remember the final layoff is they wanted to give people 2 weeks off for Christmas and on January 2nd, when they came back, have a pink slip in their box.
Ay, ay,
And
ay.
I was unwilling to do that. Let's put it that way. And, I knew what was going to happen when I said over my dead body, and it did.
Right.
They said, look, you really have to do this. I said, I'm really not. I'm quitting. I'm not going to do it. Um, and this was after, I mean, Tom and Chris were wonderful. They came to me one day. This is before that, but with during Marvel, and said, "Can we please quit?" I mean, that was very nice of them to, to not just quit, to actually come to me and they didn't care that salaries were going up. They didn't care about any of that because there was just some stuff where there was some arguments between us and Marvel that were just ridiculous. Um, So anyway, I was just trying to figure out what to do. I had this idea, like when I was, playing with comics when I was a kid, I like Cowboys and Aliens was something that I used to play
Mhm.
with friends. We used to use the little Star Trek tracer guns that shot out those little discs that are probably illegal now,
Mhm.
because they can shoot you in the eye. And there weren't really alien stuff back then, but there were bags for 99 cents of creatures
Mhm.
and these little machines that you can make these rubbery creatures yourself, which is so dangerous. I'm sure that they wouldn't let a 10-year-old use those now. But um, so I started it, and the first one that we went around with was Cowboys and Aliens,
Mhm.
and it became a bidding war,
Wow.
and not something I expected. And I remember I first went to DreamWorks because I figured Spielberg said yes to Men in Black,
Mhm.
and I should give him first dibs on Cowboys and Aliens. And uh, he did what's called a soft pass. He doesn't think it's for him or whatever, which is really a pass. It's just being nice about it.
Right.
Well told is what you tell a writer when you're not going to go for their pitch. Uh, so I walked out, told my agent, and he then set us up with every other studio in the same week, uh, from morning till night, including two different. Everyone must have heard that we were going around with it before they got the call, but they saw the poster, which was amazing, which is the same as the cover of the comic. Um, and it was so silly that Marvel had two divisions. They had Touchstone and Disney. Our agent had us pitch both of them and said, "Don't tell each other." Well, they're 20 yards apart in their office. How are we possibly not going to tell them? I mean, it's the same waiting room. It's
Right.
it's but it got into a bidding war, and then uh, uh, DreamWorks called me again and said, "Okay, we do want it." And I said, "Things have changed a bit since you were pitched.
Mhm.
I didn't think you wanted it." And there's a bidding war now going on, and the uh, Walter Parks, the president at the time, said Stephen wants to meet you for lunch. So they played the Stephen card, which works very well. Um, so I met him for lunch and where his private kitchen was and all of that, and um, I liked his vision for it, and I said, "But I got to tell you, we already pretty much are there with Universal." And he said, "Oh, I can solve that." So he leans over and picks up the phone. Now, Universal at the time was courting DreamWorks to distribute their titles, but understand that DreamWorks was actually on their lot. Still is. Um, he called and said, "Hey, Cowboys and Aliens, let's do it together." Okay, bye. He said, "Problem solved, and we'll pay you more than everyone else has offered."
Wow.
Um, so that's how we started off with Universal and DreamWorks at the beginning.
I'm wondering if you could walk us through what a pitch to a studio entails. What do you have to do? What do you present to them for a pitch?
Okay, so it goes a few ways. In a perfect world, they call you
Okay.
um, because they know something's out there. But that aside, what we would always do is we would ignore the sales of something. And we would have to ignore that because we didn't, our comics, everything was brand new. We didn't have stuff that sold a zillion copies. I mean, we had an Italian one, but that we made later. And, there were a couple, but not a whole bunch of them. So we had a whole bunch of properties, though. We made deals with a lot of artists, a lot of foreign publishers, that we'd want to take a whack at, at their books and seeing if we get movies made. So we would go into the studio, and if we had anything like, this has been a bestseller, we certainly would say that. Um, but we would often come in with these big boards, um, about, you know, well, big, about, I don't know, a couple feet tall or something, and 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide. We'd come in with boards and use them as props as we're walking them through a pitch. And we usually didn't like leaving them a leave behind, uh, because it seems better not to than to. Uh, and if and to the extent some of these comics we hadn't yet started making, we were in various levels of production, which when they got interested, we could share all that with them if they were interested, but that wouldn't really go into the pitch. But our key art would go into the pitch. Uh, and we would talk a bit about audience, but they usually get it. I mean, they got what we were shooting for. And uh, we would go into the office. We had our time slot. They were usually 10 minutes late coming in, uh, which gave us a view of the office. Are people in a good mood, not? And then we went in the office and we could see on the walls what this particular executive cares about, and on his desk, is there a family? We can look at all of that stuff because the pitch is not going to be the entire time period. There's going to be a shooting the shit period at the beginning, which is introductions and how you're doing or whatever. And, there's 10, 15 minutes of that. And so that's when we would try to connect, or they try to connect with us. And it was usually an executive and either an executive under them or an assistant that would be in there. And the pitch itself would be about half hour with 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end, or 10 minutes for questions and answers. Um, and we started really knowing the execs. So a lot of times they were comfortable telling us changes that some would tell us they don't want it, but here are some changes you may want to consider, which was really nice of them. And some said, with these changes, it might work for us. And we'd kind of go through that with them and see what kind of would make sense and what wouldn't make sense and why if it wouldn't. Um, but usually we'd want to work towards what they were thinking, and they were smarter than us in development. So, and they know their studio. So we would, no silly changes, but I mean, we would entertain whatever they're talking about and try to work in as much as we can, uh, figuring it's going to all change in the script anyway.
Gotcha.
Um, and we wouldn't go in with a screenplay.
Okay.
We would go in with a pitch, and we didn't care how the comic sold. Again, if it had high numbers, we'd use it, but high numbers in the comic industry aren't that high. So, they want to hear 10 million people. Well, we can't say that.
Right.
Uh, so we just wouldn't go in that direction. We'd really do more on story and getting to know them. Now, flash forward to the opposite of that, by the way, the pandemic, Zoom. So everyone's pitch meetings were now cut shorter. There was no seeing what's on their walls or whatever's around. There's no them walking with you to the elevator, giving you the gossip of the studio at the end.
Right.
which I always loved that part. That's all gone.
Hmm.
So it's just the straightforward pitch on Zoom. Uh, for sometimes they'll give you an hour, but typically a half hour slot. And there is shooting the ship, but it's a couple minutes.
Right.
It's not very much. So the pitches have changed a lot, but we still will show them stuff.
Hmm.
We may leave them a leave behind, kind of a, a PowerPoint or a PDF or something of what we're talking about. Uh, some of them wanted the comics. Most of them said, "Can we change the story from what's in the comic?" Which, with the exception of a couple creators, everyone we did deals with, we talked about that ahead of time. That here's the reality of once we go to a studio. Here's what we can get away with. Here's what we can't. And here's what can even change on the set. And so we'd go over that with creators that understood that process. And almost all of them were fine with it. So we knew what we could do.
I want to ask about the current climate because, you're out there looking for intellectual properties right now via Kickstarter, GoFundMe's, all these things. There's independent creations coming from professionals, coming from people trying to get into the industry. What are you looking for when picking and choosing at this point projects to take in?
Um, I'm looking for something that isn't too close to what we're doing
Okay.
already in development. Or in some cases, we were really close. Something was really close in development, and we liked that one better.
Mhm.
So, um, I mean, that's happened too.
Mhm.
I, I mean, because we don't care where the idea comes from.
Right.
But what we're looking for is what can work in studios, what can work in theaters or in TV now, or in a future that isn't too far away.
Mhm.
Uh, you could develop for 10 years, and I mean that really.
Mhm.
Uh, it can take that long because studio regimes change. And you may be in with a regime that likes it, and you're there for several years. A new regime comes in and doesn't like it and kind of just, drags you along.
Mhm.
And then another new regime comes in who likes it again. And as a producer, it's our job to keep it alive,
Right.
or take it to a different studio, of course,
Mhm.
which we would do a lot. Um, oh, by the way, on the pitches, we would also very often team up with another producer.
Okay.
Figuring double the contacts is always better.
Mhm.
And I mean, well thought out other ones, and very often with a writer who was, willing to develop on spec, not write a whole script, but just develop. One did write a script, but that wasn't normal.
Right.
Um, and let them do the pitching when we're in the room, and we would choreograph it like where each person sits.
Right.
Like we wouldn't want to place the studio executive unless they have their place they like already. Because if we're in a conference room, we don't want them looking facing a window where their assistant can be giving them a note.
Right.
And I can tell. I'm always looking at eyes. Did someone check out for some reason?
Right.
Is someone going over his grocery list? Um, but in the office, they always had their favorite chair, so we wouldn't do it there. But
Mhm.
we know if it was a writing team who would sit next to each other and that we'd always kind of figure that out.
It sounds almost like a football playbook. Like you have to know where everyone's, hit certain plays to get everyone located where you want to get the most optimal results.
And part of that, and when you say optimal results,
Mhm.
it because a ringer could be thrown at us. And uh, if you have the writers in a position like kitty corner,
Mhm.
one can like kick the other's foot without, the exec seeing it, with their own code language. Uh, or uh, you know, I or a different exec who was there could jump in and just make a comment, which also served a purpose of not hearing just one voice for the entire half hour, just in terms of attention. It's always nice to do a little choreographing with that's why I like writer teams
Right.
because there's two of them doing the talking. Um, and it's sad that the writers that do the best are ones who are good in the room.
Mhm.
But I would say the best, but their best chance is if they're good in a room,
Gotcha.
as opposed to more monotone, and
Mhm.
they don't have, and a lot of writers are not known for being, gregarious. I mean, they're at home typing and aren't really comfortable in that way, and we would try to choreograph and go over that with them as much as we could, as much as they were comfortable with it.
Wow.
So yes, it is like trying to go for optimal results.
Well, speaking of optimal results, 2025 saw, as you mentioned before, the return of Youngblood with
Yes.
fans talking about it. It was a
Mhm.
very exciting time. Why was this the right time for that project?
Rob and I just felt it was,
Mhm.
and also that November was the right time to come out with it.
Mhm.
And I mean, and uh, we had 40 covers,
Yeah.
and uh, all of Image got behind it.
Mhm.
And so 30 of the comics and Image publishes all did homages to Youngblood on their cover that particular month in November and early into December. So it was interesting when we first launched Youngblood.
Mhm.
It was launching it with us distributing it and us and Image publishing it, and now we're launching it with us co-publishing with Image, but Image doing the main distribution and publishing of it.
Mhm.
So it kind of lightning struck again,
Mhm.
and it's doing very well.
What do you think it is about that book that's let it last this long and to have a fan base that still is excited when new things like this come out?
Part of it is 90s are in.
Mhm.
So I mean, you can't you have to give that its own value, and it's I mean, Rob's had a long time to think about where the storyline should go, and what the how the characters should be characterized and seen, and what they're thinking,
Mhm.
and uh, it was a time in his life, or is a time in his life, where uh, his desire was to put everything into this. Writing it, drawing it, coming out with it monthly,
Mhm.
uh, uh, promoting it on
Mhm.
his whatnot and everything before it came out.
Mhm.
And it just all coalesced into now.
So you guys are looking at this. This is a long-term project that you hope has legs that's going to go on for a while more to come.
I think we kind of have 30 years of proof of that. So
Yep.
we're comfortable with legs.
Any other books that we can look forward to or new projects that might be brewing as well?
We have some that are going to be coming out, um, graphic novels. Either we may put them out foreign first this coming fall, and then bring them here.
Mhm.
But there's one called Atlantis Rising, which we came out with a floppy version of it ages ago, but we've actually very much made changes to it
Mhm.
now. So it's actually a bit of a different story in that we've fixed some character things that need to get fixed and all that kind of stuff. It's basically 10,000 years ago, Atlantis sank but never died.
Wow.
And now, with our pollutants, and in particular, a bomb that never went off, but that got dropped and had radiation and killed one of their city states,
Mhm.
they're in domes.
Right.
And they're not water breathing, they're air breathing.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, they're human, look a little bit different because they've grown at different pressures. Uh, and we have a whole compendium that we wrote with them. If you're interested, I'm happy to send it to you, of like
Awesome.
how what goes into the stories as if it's real.
Mhm. That sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah. So we have that.
Mhm.
Uh, we came out years ago with something called Unique,
Mhm.
that we've also made. many, many changes to for the graphic novel,
Mhm.
which is what it was always intended to be anyway. But we really made a lot of good changes.
Mhm.
So that also be that same timeline. It's about a guy who thinks who everyone is told is schizophrenic,
Mhm.
because he's seeing things that aren't there and all of that.
Mhm.
Well, it turns out he's seeing things that really are there, just in a different dimension.
It's pretty
And he's unique in that there aren't many people who can go to the other dimension.
right.
And we come across him as he's learning that.
Mhm.
He was going nuts because he'd look in his refrigerator and there'd be a lot of milk, and look again and there's no milk. Um, so strange things were happening. Uh, and we love that story. So we have a lot of individual stories like that are coming out.
If we talk a year from today, what would your goals for Platinum be in 2026 that you hope to accomplish?
Um, for sure that we're going into production that year on some streaming shows, and hopefully theatrical, as long as theaters do survive.
Mhm.
I love the theatrical experience myself.
Mhm.
I like sitting in a big dark theater and hearing people eat popcorn and eating popcorn. Or
Mhm.
here at the AMC theaters, they have this Bavarian pretzel, which is literally a pound and a half and comes in a pizza-sized box. Uh, that I pray my friends will eat some of too, because otherwise I am. But I like the theatrical experience.
Mhm.
So I mean, so movies intended for, we also are planning. But they can be changed around to work for series too. Not always easily, but they can. And the good thing about series is you get more hours to tell your story.
Right.
Like, we had a series called Jeremiah
Mhm.
on the air. I don't know if you remember that one. That was on Showtime.
Mhm.
We got 35 hours to tell a story, which we gave a beginning, middle, and end. It's about 15 years from now. Everyone over the age of puberty died from a plague.
Yeah.
So they're now growing up, but they're making the same mistakes as made in world history. Fascists are popping up, fiefdoms are popping up. I mean, there's no country. People are claiming the country that pops up. But we got 35 hours to tell that story on TV, and we were doing all of the grassroots marketing for it.
Wow.
Uh, they did the mainstream, which was really just the only one they were going to promote was the pilot. And we just said, just give us 10% of that budget and let us do grassroots throughout the show. And they did.
Mhm.
And it turned out to go well in the ratings for that. It was their second highest show the entire time it ran. And Nightman was doing well in its ratings too when that ran. And that was from the Ultraverse. So I expect next year that we'll be going into production
Wow.
with streaming shows. And I can't tell you which one, not because I don't want to, but because it's a horse race and you never know.
Right.
We have several in the exact same state of development, and you don't know which the studio is going to say, that one, let's go.
And we are back. So that was really such a fun interview to speak to him. He's now, as we said before, working with Rob Liefeld again. Young Blood is back out. That's huge. And just hearing how the story came together, how Image and Malibu started with their working agreement. Really, really cool stuff. We'd love to have Scott back on, talk more and more, because I think, again, with a lot of these guys, we're just sort of scratching the surface here as far as what they have to say. So, Scott, thank you again. Guys, thank you again for listening. We'll see you Friday with a brand new episode. Have a wonderful day. Bye.